Now, I compiled a list of insane One Piece moments. Actually, these are just blank papers, because who the flip has time for that? If you've seen One Piece, you know it's pretty insane. The amount of insane moments are actually pretty limitless. There are definitely too many moments to make a list on. Now, for context, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm going through One Piece. I'm at the very end of Enies Lobby, and in fact, I enjoy One Piece overall, which is why I feel a little bit bad, because my last couple of videos have been more critical. Well, not really. I made a video talking about One Piece characters I hate, and then I also made another video talking about one of the most annoying things in One Piece to me. So I feel like I gotta talk about something positive, so insane One Piece moments. And you might be like, wait, how the flip is that positive? Well, I love the insanity in One Piece. In fact, many of my favorite One Piece moments are the most insane ones, so I decided, let me choose a few that live rent-free in my head. And really, I decided that the best way to do it is I'm gonna go back to where it all began. In the East Blue Saga. And I'm gonna choose one insane moment from each of the East Blue Saga arcs, but enough rambling. Let me dive into the first insane moment in the very first arc. Now you might be like, which moment is he gonna choose from? Is he gonna choose the moment where Luffy absolutely smoked Alvida? That will become important for a later moment, so keep that in mind. But no, I'm gonna choose the moment where Luffy recruits Zoro to his crew. And you might be like, okay, like I don't know how well you remember this moment, but it's one of those moments that every time I think about it, I'm like, it's utterly insane. So what happened? Well, Luffy shows up at this marine base because of course he decides the best place to recruit the first member of his pirate crew is at a marine base. And better yet, why not recruit a pirate hunter to your pirate crew? Makes perfect sense, right? Not really, but it worked out. So Luffy is a genius. I will not question him. But eventually he climbs over this wall where Zoro is being held prisoner. And everyone has told him, this guy Zoro, bad news. Like, no, stay away from him. Worse than that, he's a pirate hunter. You're a pirate. What are we even doing here? But he walks up to him. And I don't know what goes through Luffy's head, but the first thing he decides to do to this man is he decides he's going to start taunting him. He's like, I thought you were strong. How strong can you be if you're locked up here? And Zoro's kind of taken aback, like, who the flip are you? And Luffy says like one more thing to him, which is kind of a taunt. Anyway, so Luffy walks away, he finds out some information about Zoro, and he decides like, oh, Zoro isn't a bad guy, which personally, even as someone who loves Zoro, I still think the jury is out on that. Like, I've seen what he did at Whiskey Peak and what he did to, anyway, it's too much to get into right now. But Luffy's like, he's a good guy. He even has a bar fight defending Zoro's name. Don't really need to talk about it. He goes back and Zoro is daydreaming and he looks up and he just sees this Straw Hat guy and he's like, the flip is wrong with this dude? Like, how long have you even been standing there? And Luffy looks at him, and keep in mind, Luffy said like a couple of sentences to him, and most of what he said was just taunting him. And he's like, join my pirate crew. What the flip do you mean? Who are you? Like, seriously, I don't know who you are. You've said like a couple of things to me. And Luffy's like, I'm a pirate. I want you to join my pirate crew. And Zoro is dumbfounded, like, you do understand I'm a pirate hunter. Like, I hate pirates. I can't stand them. They are scum of the earth. I hunt them for a living. I hate them. And Luffy hears all this and he's like, yeah. Well, that's kind of a shame because I already decided you're joining the crew, so like, no takebacks. And Zoro is only getting more and more upset with the guy, which I can't even blame Zoro for because, like, this guy Luffy, clearly a little weird, but it doesn't even matter because it gets more and more insane. And really, the insane moment hasn't quite arrived. It's about to, because Zoro's like, no, I'm not joining you. I hate pirates. And Luffy's like, well, I already said, like, no takebacks. But then Luffy's like, well, you're a swordsman. How about I go and get your swords? And Zoro doesn't like this idea. He's told this man no like 4 times. He's even threatened his life a couple of times in this conversation. And Luffy's like, I'll run to the marine base, find your swords, bring them back. We'll leave together. Zoro hates this idea. He's like, yeah, you bring those swords back, I'll kill you. But regardless, this is the crazy part. Because keep in mind, Luffy is supposed to be heading towards a giant marine base. Can't miss it. This is the direction Luffy is running. See anything weird about this? Like anything whatsoever? Because again, I still can't believe this dude is supposed to be heading towards a giant marine base and there are no buildings that direction. Like, where the flip are you even running? You know it's so bad that even Zoro, who was pretty upset with Luffy and even threatened his life a few times, and keep in mind, Zoro, notoriously bad with directions. Like anyone who knows anything about One Piece knows, yeah, Zoro can't tell directions to save his life. But apparently in this moment, he is so dumbfounded by what he's witnessing. This guy is running God knows where, like where the flip are you going? So much so that Zoro's like, you know what? That's so bad. I'm actually gonna help him. Like, I didn't even want him to get my swords, but he's like, idiot! Where the flip are you going? The base is the other way. Anyway, so Luffy gets his swords. One thing leads to another. They join forces. They head out to sea. And then that leads into the next crazy moment, because here you have these two navigating. Now, I think it's important to lay some more groundwork here with this moment, because looking at this, you have Luffy and Zoro trying to get, I don't know, to the next island or something like that. I'm not even sure if they knew. They just set out to sea, which is a horrible idea. And looking back on this, I'm like, there was a good chance, like 90+% chance, they die at sea. Not because like they run into a foe or anything like that. No, just because their greatest enemy is navigation. Like, Zoro gets a lot of crap for the fact that he can't tell directions, and rightfully so. But Luffy, for whatever reason, is even worse than him. Like, as far as I know, Luffy's entire navigational experience up to this point, he sets out to sea. Day one, ends up in a whirlpool, one thing leads to another. And then the only other time I've seen him on a boat, aside from this time, is when he met that kid Kobe, and Kobe helped him get to the marine base where he recruited Zoro. And Luffy had this line that, again, lives rent-free in my head for just how insane it is, because Luffy's like, whoa, like, Kobe, you mean to tell me we can actually reach the place we set out for? Like, you can do that? I barely even know what to say about that. So anyway, Zoro and him, bad situation. And it seems like both of them have this idea that the other one is navigating, but in reality, neither of them is, because Luffy's like, how much longer until we reach our destination? And Zoro's kind of confused, like, I thought you were navigating. What do you usually do? And Luffy's like, I don't know, I usually just drift to the next spot. Keep in mind, as far as I've seen, the one time Luffy was on his own navigating, he got shipwrecked. Not great experience. And Luffy's like, well, don't you know how to navigate? Like, you were a bounty hunter? And Zoro's like, well, funny thing, I actually didn't even want to become a bounty hunter. I set out to sea to find this one guy who is Mihawk. Couldn't find him, tried to go back home, got lost. Then I became a bounty hunter. Okay, that's kind of embarrassing, but in a weird way, you should be thankful because you ended up on Luffy's crew because of it. Because, hey, you wouldn't have ended up at that marine base, so it all worked out. But anyway, that's not the crazy part. The crazy part is what happens next. Because then Luffy's like, okay, I'm hungry. He looks up and he sees a bird. Now, this is not a normal bird, and I'll get to that in a moment. But Luffy does something incredibly dangerous. He gets an idea. Anytime this man gets an idea, you should be worried. Like, some of them work out, most of them don't. Because then Luffy looks at Zoro and is like, what about that bird? And Zoro's kind of confused, like, what? How are you going to get it? And before he can even say anything, Luffy slingshots himself up. Now, it's not a normal bird. It's massive. It catches this guy. It's actually choking him. Flying somewhere. What was the plan? Like, seriously, what was the plan? Anyway, Luffy is flying towards Orangetown, which is the second arc. But again, the chances of Luffy and Zoro finding their way to the next island is not likely. So this bird actually helped, but what about Zoro? Well, Zoro was frantically rowing after this bird, but he's the kind of guy that can still get lost even if he had this bird in sight. Now, thankfully, there were some pirates that were shipwrecked. Zoro was kind enough to allow them onto the boat. For whatever reason, they threaten Zoro immediately, and he looks at them and he's like, so you've chosen death. Anyway, he doesn't kill them, but he badly beats them up, forces them to row him to the nearest island. So it all worked out. But again, that's not even the end of the insane moment, because really, Luffy is flying with this bird over Orangetown, and Buggy the Pirate is like, I don't know what that is. Shoot that down. Big mistake. They hit Luffy. He falls down right in front of Nami, who's running from some Buggy Pirates because she stole a map. But anyway, he gets up, he brushes himself off. Nami is looking at him like, who the flip is this guy? Like, what is wrong with him? And he's just like, I don't know what just happened, but it was awesome. Now, of course, one thing leads to another. Nami agrees to tag along with Zoro and Luffy. But again, that's not how Luffy operates. Like, he already decided you're part of the crew and no takebacks. Anyway, so they head to the next place, which is the start of the next arc, Syrup Village. But really, I want to fixate in on one key moment. Because they, of course, meet Usopp. They quickly realize that Kuro the butler is actually really bad. He's about to get his Black Cat pirates to attack the next day, enacting his evil plan. So this sets up an insane moment. So the insanity basically begins with the night before the attack because Usopp is setting up all these traps with the crew, and they're like, okay, they're going to come up this particular passage, and then we'll get them. But anyway, it's a pretty good plan, except for one small thing. They're at the wrong place, which is kind of a problem. Like, I'm not the greatest tactician, But if you're at the wrong place, probably not a good thing. So the Black Cat Pirates are coming up another place and they can kind of hear them in the distance and they quickly realize like, oh, we're at the wrong place. But regardless, Luffy's like, where do I go? And they're like, head north. So Luffy's like, okay. He just takes off. He starts running north. But I'm like, any experience with this guy shows he can't tell directions either. Like Zoro gets most of the slander. But for whatever reason, in the early part of the story, Luffy is arguably far worse. Because Luffy is running north, doesn't know where north is. Bit of a problem. Again, this is not even the insane moment. It's setting up the insane moment. Because what's even worse is the traps that they set up with the oil behind them on this slant. Nami slips in it, she grabs Zoro, tosses him down, and Usopp and Nami start running towards the Black Cat Pirates and are the first two to arrive, which is a bit of a problem because the two strongest fighters are sidelined, and the guy who got lost is not even Zoro. There was even a point when Luffy was frantically running around the entire island where I was getting a little worried. Like, what if he runs into the wrong people, like a bunch of civilians, and he's like, ah, the Black Cat Pirates. Because he definitely would have killed a bunch of innocent people. I was just worried. And to be fair, still to this day, I don't know what he got up to. But anyway, some time goes by. Nami and Usopp are trying their best to hold the Black Cat Pirates at bay. Not really doing a good job, but they're trying. But then somehow, both Luffy and Zoro show up at the same time, which I'm like, what kind of miracle is this? First of all, how did they both find their way back here? And second of all, what is the likelihood they arrive here at the same time? Regardless though, it's pretty fortunate. Now Luffy wants to murder Usopp because he's like, Usopp, you didn't tell me which way was north. But my question is, why did you take off and start running north if you have no idea where north is? Anyway, I digress. But the Black Cat Pirates are like, yeah, those two are a problem. So they have Django the hypnotist basically hypnotize the Black Cat Pirates into becoming stronger. And it works. Small problem. Luffy was also looking at all this and he also got hypnotized. So now you have an even stronger, angrier, kind of feral Luffy beat up all the Black Cat Pirates, but what's worse than that, this is the insane moment, is for whatever reason, he runs to the front of their ship, rips off the front of the ship with this cat thing on top, and he is about to beat all of them to death with the front of their ship. Like, this is actually going down. Like, that's kind of messed up. Luffy, you sick, sick man. Now Django hypnotizes him again. He falls asleep. Kuro shows up. Now Nami eventually wakes Luffy up again by stepping on his face. Then Luffy, of course, cooks everyone. One thing leads to another. They get Usopp. They head to their next destination, the Baratie. But then, just as they're arriving at the Baratie, you also have a marine ship arriving at the Baratie. That's unfortunate. And one thing leads to another, and this full body guy in charge of the ship is like, yeah, sink them. So that's not good. They fire a cannonball, and Luffy's like, okay, this is what I'm here for. Actually, I'm here for a lot more, but I can handle this. And so Luffy absorbs the impact of this cannonball, but I want you to take a look at this moment here, because I didn't catch this the first time. But upon rewatching, I saw this, and is there something here that looks a little off? Aside from the stretchy guy, because, yeah, you just have to accept that. But the strange thing is, this cannonball was going to miss. Like, upon running some calculations, which is just using my eyes, this would have missed. So Luffy, you saved no one and nothing. And what's worse than that, one of his hands slips, and of course he fires the cannonball at the Baratie, and I'm like, yeah. But it gets worse, because it would have been fine if maybe it killed like a couple of customers, like, no big deal. Or maybe if it killed like a random chef, it's like, But of course it had to go into the room of the head chef and injure the head chef, and what's worse than that, this head chef, his name is Zeph, is an infamous former pirate, so you're like, that's not good. Because if there's one guy who can handle this crazy pirate, it's a former crazy pirate. And so the chefs at the Baratie quickly realize like, oh, it was Luffy. Because he tells them it was him, which still irritates me, but keep in mind, like, this moment continues to build in insanity. Like, everything that's happened so far is kind of insane, but it gets worse and worse and worse, because Luffy here is dragged before head chef Zeph. Like, I've never seen Luffy look quite this defeated, and that includes all the times he's fought against really strong villains. That even includes when Crocodile impaled him with a hook, threw him in a quicksand pit to die. He still looked less defeated than he does here. But again, the insanity only increases because Luffy is dragged before Zeph, and he's definitely apologetic, but then he looks up and he sees Zeph has a peg leg. So Luffy has a few options in this moment. He could look at his peg leg and be like, I wonder how he got that. Or the second option is freak out, Because apparently you thought you shot his leg off. Of course, because Luffy is Luffy, he's going to do that second option, which he does, and Zeph gets kind of upset with him because he's like, you're an idiot. So this meeting is probably not going to go well. But even with that expectation, it somehow went way worse than I was anticipating. Because Zeph's like, hey, you damaged my restaurant, we gotta work out a deal. And Luffy's like, okay, I'll take responsibility, which I think is kind of admirable because, let's be honest, Luffy is kind of insane. If he was just like, I'll just start destroying this place until you let me go, they'd probably let him go. Like, who's gonna stop him? Like, Zeph is strong, but could he stop him? I don't know. But regardless, Luffy's like, yeah, I'll take responsibility, but I've got some bad news. I'm flat broke. And Zeph kind of looks at him and he smiles, and I'm like, I don't like that. So Zeph's like, okay, you can work here for a year. Luffy's like, absolutely not. And I'm like, okay, Luffy, good. Please show me your negotiation skills. Keep in mind, you are a wildly dangerous individual who probably could threaten physical violence to get your way. I'm not saying you should, but you could. And Luffy's like, how about this, 1 week? And Zeph's like, no, a year. Eventually, they settle on a year, so not a great negotiation, but actually it went way worse. Because during the negotiations, things got a little violent when Zeph just decided, oh, I'll start beating this guy up. And the thing is, this was a beatdown. It was tough to look at. But also, to be fair, Zeph also has that old man strength, which is something you shouldn't underestimate, like ever. But eventually, Zeph stops beating up this guy for a moment to offer him another deal. He's like, well, if you don't want to work here for a year, you could always cut off your leg. But why? Like, I understand Zeph has a peg leg, but getting Luffy to saw off his own leg wouldn't help you. Like, this dude Zeph is kind of sick. And Luffy's like, absolutely not. Why would I saw off my leg? So they go back to fighting. We pan away to the main restaurant. And then a few moments later, presumably they've been fighting upstairs the entire time, they burst through the ceiling. And Luffy's like, I can breathe again. Of course, Luffy eventually works there, but then he pays off his debt by saving the place. One thing leads to another. He picks up Sanji. Now, of course, Nami ran off with their ship to Arlong Park, which sets up the next crazy moment. You have Luffy, Sanji, and one of Zoro's bounty hunter friends, Yosuke. They're on this boat together. They're heading to Arlong Park. And what happens with this group is just utterly insane because Sanji cooks a nice meal for them. They're enjoying it on their way to Arlong Park. Now, small issue is that the scent of the food travels, and this giant sea cow thing, I don't really know what it is. It's just a giant sea cow monster from the Grand Line. It's part of the Arlong Pirates. It's really strong. It shows up at Luffy and Sanji's boat, and clearly it wants some of their food. Now at first it's being a little friendly, and the thing is most people view this as a monster, like Yosuke here is like, oh my gosh, we are going to die. But Luffy and Sanji aren't worried at all, despite this thing being multiple times the size of their boat. They're just debating what it is. Sanji's like, I think that's a hippo. Luffy's like, I think it's a cow. I'm more inclined to side with Luffy. I don't really know what it is. A sea cow. I'll call it like a sea cow or a cow. But so far things are pretty peaceful. But then Yosuke here is like, oh, I think it wants some of our food. And Luffy in this moment looks back and look at this man's face. This is a man who's just like, oh. So this cow is chosen to die here. And without hesitation, he just smokes this cow. But here's the thing. It only gets worse and worse and more insane. Because then Sanji is like, no, Luffy. And he offers this cow a little bit of food. But then this cow is about to bite some of the food, and Sanji kicks this thing. Now Sanji uses the excuse like, oh, it was going to bite my hand. But to be honest, I thought he was going to kick the thing regardless. And look at Luffy's face after Sanji did this. He shows no remorse. Yosuke is like, yeah, we're definitely going to die. Luffy is like, serves that stupid cow right. But things escalate quickly. Luffy and Sanji jump this cow, beat it up, but it only gets worse for this cow because then they force it to pull them to Arlong Park. Luffy and Sanji didn't know anything about this cow. It could have been the worst cow in the world. It could have been the most villainous creature in this entire One Piece world, or the nicest thing. They know nothing about it. All they knew was it wanted some food, and they jumped it. But regardless, the moment gets crazier because the cow is approaching Arlong Park, but it starts going the wrong way into a wall, and Luffy's getting upset, and he's like, you stupid cow! Like, that way, you stupid cow! But anyway, it's too late because the cow smacks into the wall, their boat goes flying, so Luffy arrives in style, flying on this boat. Like, okay. His boat even runs into Zoro by chance, which is probably a good thing for Zoro because he was definitely lost. But regardless, that was kind of an insane moment. Anyway, one thing leads to another. They get Nami back. Everyone heads to Loguetown. And this moment here is the final crazy moment I'll talk about in this video. because they arrive in Loguetown and Luffy just wants to see where the king of the pirates was executed. So for most of the arc, he's looking for the execution platform. Now there are a couple of key things to note. Number one, you have Buggy the Clown, including some other people, looking for Luffy in this town. That will become important in a moment. And second of all, the guy who oversees this town is Captain Smoker. Pretty strong guy, most pirates in the East Blue are afraid of him. But he gets some info that this rookie pirate with a massive bounty all of a sudden is coming to Loguetown. Now he doesn't know what Luffy looks like quite yet. And then he hears some pirates are making some ruckus at the docks and he's like, oh, this is Luffy, he's excited. He heads down, it's some weak pirates, he handles them quickly. And he's a little disappointed, like, man, I wanted to see Luffy, like, where was he? I really thought he was going to show up. And he's looking around and he sees like this crazy looking guy just frantically looking around. Now that crazy guy is Luffy. He walks right up to Smoker and the first thing Luffy says to him is, where do they kill people? Like, what? And Smoker thinks that's a little weird, like, what is wrong with this kid? But it gets stranger, because then all of a sudden Luffy's like, yeah, I'm looking for where the king of the pirates was executed. Okay, that's even more concerning. But then the worst part is, Smoker was here to find Luffy. Luffy walks up to him, kind of taunts him, and then Smoker actually gives him directions to where Luffy wanted to go. Anyway, so Luffy arrives at the execution platform, he starts climbing it, which is a little weird, like a bunch of people are looking on like, what is wrong with this guy? Even some city officials are like, get down from there, like what is wrong with you? But then all of a sudden that official gets absolutely smoked by this girl with a mace. Now everyone is infatuated with her, it's Alvida from the very first episode. But that's not even the weird part. The weird part is actually when she starts talking to Luffy and she's like, I'm glad I ran into you again. And Luffy's kind of confused, like, I don't know you. And she's like, certainly you remember me. And Luffy's like, no, I've never seen this woman in my life. But then it gets really weird for Luffy because then she's like, oh, don't you remember how you struck me? Oh, no. Like, I will not be saddled with the woman beater allegations. Like, this is a man who is terrified in this moment. And you even have everyone in the crowd that's infatuated with Alvida looking up at Luffy like, oh man, what a sicko. But Alvida is going on and she's like, yeah, when you struck me, I realized you were the man for me. Like, I love the way you struck me. And Luffy's kind of weirded out by this. But he's like, yeah, I still don't know who you are. Which on the one hand is kind of concerning because how many women have you struck? Now, to be fair to Luffy, he doesn't discriminate. Men, women, children, animals, he'll fight you all. But Alvida tells him who she is, how she ate a devil fruit and now she looks like this. But I just find this whole moment insane, and it gets crazier because Alvida is with Buggy. And Buggy, of course, sneak attacks Luffy. He's already on the execution platform, and he's like, I'm gonna execute you. And the strangest part is, it takes Luffy a long time, like way longer than it should, to realize, like, oh yeah, this dude is actually gonna kill me. And only then does he start to freak out. Now, of course, he gets saved by lightning, so what are you gonna do? But anyway, just a bunch of insane moments in the East Blue Saga. I could go on and on and on about so many more. These were just a few, but what do you think? If you want to see more of these kind of videos, please like and subscribe. And thank you for watching.